Yeah, this probably should have been a TV show. Well, howdy there, partner. Welcome to my rustic dance hall and saloon. Today we're talking about Kevin Costner's magnum opus, Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1. Why? That's a good question. In case you haven't heard, other Uncle Kevin decided to spend all his money to make the Western of all Westerns, an epic 4-part motion picture event that finally, at last, shows the story of the West in all its mythical, epic, sweeping, very dull glory. Your Fox News dad will say he liked it, and your Fox News mom will say it was pretty nice. At least that's what the theater full of $5 Tuesday evening Fox News parents I saw it with said. So that's how my summer's going. I'll say that the one thing I was worried about was that this movie would be an angry man's last angry attempt to shout his relevance to an entertainment world that had left him behind before shifting to Daily Wire originals, or what physicians call Rob Schneidering oneself.
And that's what's wrong with Bart's generation. Now as for your generation...
And I'm pleased to say that isn't what we have here. What we have ultimately is safe to the point of dullness, but it still has a good deal of humanity and a really high level of craftsmanship. People expecting something like Dances with Wolves, for better or for worse, will be a little disappointed. That film, for all its flaws, has a cast of compelling characters and a well-told story that mainstream audiences hadn't really experienced before. Instead, this film feels much more like just kind of a retread of how the West was won. A very well made, but also very boring public service announcement about how oil drilling will take us into the future, posing as an epic movie about the brave, very boring people who tamed the West.
All the heritage of a people free to dream, free to act, free to mold their own destiny.
Horizon's most interesting element is also probably its biggest weakness, its extreme breadth. It wants to tell the story of the West in a very broad sense, and as such we are introduced to several independent storylines, each with their own characters. This unique story structure is interesting on paper, but it also means that the movie overall is pretty dull because we can't really focus on anyone as much as we need to invest in them. The result is like a pond that covers a lot of ground but is only like 6 inches deep. It doesn't hold any interesting fish. In addition, every character is basically just an archetype and nothing more, which makes the investment problem even worse. Some of the archetypes we have include the pensive, honorable soldier, the hardy, independent pioneer woman, the pure-hearted girl the boys in blue are all fighting for, the lone, stoic gunslinger, the whore with a heart of gold, the tough love frontiersman, the clueless, entitled English lady, the hapless, wussy English man, the wise, peaceful tribal chief, the impulsive, violent tribal warrior, and slimy, greasy, long-haired bad guys. At no point does anyone really act counter to their archetype, and each character's story is pretty dull as a result.
Mamma mia!
Hützmann!
Yeehaw! Arr, me mateys. Arr.
Additionally, the following gender roles are strictly adhered to at all times. Good men are peaceful unless provoked, protective but not controlling, and always correct with the ideas they have for or about women.
That's good.
Bad men are greasy and effeminate, or greasy and muscular and hit women.
Ooh, that's bad.
Good women are strong and or feisty but not correct in the ideas they have about or for themselves.
That's good.
Bad women are greasy and masculine.
That's bad.
The movie is, to its core, as conventional as it is possible to be when it comes to genre conventions of the classical Western. Conventions last stated in their pure form by how the West was won, 60 years ago. The Western has always been an extremely nostalgic genre, cut from a similar cloth as Southern lost cause mythology. It pines for a simpler time, when there was honor in simple, decent living, and a man could make his own fortune if he just braved the elements and stuck it out. It also serves as an explanation of the moral correctness of manifest destiny.
Once something has been approved by the government, it's no longer immoral.
So, movie westerns from their inception through how the West was won are often simple morality plays where an honest, unglamorous white hero fights for what is his and protects others from the usually non-white, forces of evil. Or the railroads. American audiences loved this type of thing, and we made a ton of it. By the time the 60s roll around, though, the culture is changing, and westerns start examining and deconstructing themselves. The Italians give us the ultra-violent anti-hero, and we move on to things like McCabe and Mrs. Miller and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Finally, the classical western is brutally murdered by Blazing Saddles, with its decades of cultural inbreeding and overt racism called out and pilloried.
You know, morons.
And white America moves on to police procedurals as our vehicle for telling ourselves we are better than the degenerate non-whites creeping into our cities.
I know what you're thinking.
But there are still postmodern and deconstructivist westerns being made. Kevin Costner himself makes one of the landmark revisionist westerns in Dances with Wolves, one of the bigger westerns to point out that maybe white people didn't act with moral impunity with regards to the native population, who it turns out were maybe not bad. Its theme feels almost trite today, but at the time it was one of the first big hit westerns to go there, and was tremendously successful as a result, even if its legacy has significantly diminished since then. Increasingly, other westerns are dealing with the realities of colonialism and genocide, and interrogating the mythology we have built to shield ourselves from those unpleasant realities. So Horizon has a certain kind of boldness in it to more or less skip all that stuff and reiterate emphatically and repeatedly the values and tropes of the long-dead classical western, namely the moral, perhaps even divine prerogative white America has to settle the West and raise it up in its own masculine image. Now, this is not to say that Horizon does not engage with different perspectives, because it does, most notably in scenes with an Apache community and with one of our pensive honorable soldiers. And, to its credit, the movie doesn't minimize or ridicule characters who feel complicated about settling and its ensuing conflicts. They aren't portrayed as silly or emotional or unserious or unpatriotic, as might be the case if other people were making this movie. In fact, there was actually a moment when I thought the movie was gonna actually get into really interesting territory. 3 pensive honorable soldiers are talking together about what will ultimately happen to the indigenous people as more settlers invade the land. And I thought for a moment that the movie was going to take a turn and portray our mythology of the West as a slow, inevitable tragedy rather than a glorious, if complicated, achievement. The horizon of a sunset rather than a sunrise, if you will. But I don't think that's what will happen. Obviously, I haven't seen the second film yet, and the others might not even get made. But the most nuance these movies appear capable of is about what we get with Dances with Wolves, only without the benefit of developed, complicated characters or a focused story. Someone's gonna make friends with an Indian, and Kevin Costner will take on some greasy, corrupt profiteers, then we'll shoot some greasy bad guys and go home. Like I said, your Fox News dad will think it's pretty good.
I'd just like to have a drink tonight with someone who knows how to act.
All that said, I don't want to give the movie too much credit because it is actually pretty myopic in a lot of ways, specifically its point of view, which is pretty aggressively male and white, which isn't inherently a problem and also not all that remarkable in a media landscape still predominantly occupied by those demographics. And this is something Costner has talked about, saying recently that he makes movies for men or whatever, which is also fine. In fact, I think it's good for art to explore topics like masculinity with nuance and care. This isn't one of those takes where male equals bad. I think that's lazy criticism. In this case, it's more that male equals boring, which we'll get to. Besides, the type of masculinity Costner foregrounds in this movie is generally pretty healthy, I think. The good men in the movie work hard, think about their actions, do things for other people, and feel and show emotions, including girl emotions like love.
How innovative! I like it! Bah!
They aren't controlling or manipulative or driven by vice. They are perhaps a little too stoic at times and poorly communicative as a result, but on the whole, there's a lot of positive stuff to work with. We could certainly do a lot worse. Other Uncle Kevin. Where it starts to get a little weird is that all of the men are like this. They are all essentially the same character. A John Dunbar for all seasons, if you will. Allow me to demonstrate. 1. The pensive honorable soldier, played by Sam Worthington, meets and starts stoically looking out for hardy pioneer woman and her pure-hearted daughter after rescuing them from danger. Then they fall in love. 2. The Irish pensive honorable soldier meets and starts stoically looking out for a hardy pioneer woman and her pure-hearted daughter after rescuing them from danger, convincing his feisty wife to give them things that used to belong to their own pure-hearted daughter before she died. 3. Kevin Costner meets and starts stoically looking out for the whore with a heart of gold and the innocent baby she is caring for after rescuing them from danger. They don't fall in love, but they do get it on. And, sidebar, it's horrifically awkward because Kevin Costner is elderly and the poor actress he is directing is definitely not. Like I said, your Fox News dad will think it's pretty good. 4. The tough love frontiersman meets and starts stoically looking out for the wimpy entitled English people, who, for all intents and purposes, are both girls, basically, while trying to protect them from danger. 5. The wise, peaceful tribal chief has already met and stoically taken care of an innocent and pure-hearted child whom he adopts, presumably after rescuing him from danger. You get the picture. Good man is situationally forced to care for helpless women and or children in a hazardous circumstance through which they, I was going to say grow, but that doesn't really happen so much as they continue being good men. I guess they experience the unique fulfillment of fulfilling their gender role. Whatever, in none of these situations do the female characters actually do anything. That's not true. Hardy pioneer woman does resourcefully save herself and her pure-hearted daughter, but after that does nothing until falling in love off-screen and professing her love abruptly on-screen for her pensive, honorable soldier of choice, the young hot one. Her pure-hearted daughter has also apparently been making inroads with one of the boys in blue, also off-screen, until she too abruptly professes her love on-screen. Whore with a heart of gold does nothing after being rescued by Kevin Costner except realize he was right to rescue her and she was wrong to complain about it, until she pulls a Laurie from Lonesome Dove and decides to leave with an impulsive, violent gambler for some reason. We don't see the entitled wimpy English doing what they've been instructed and learning and growing, even though they keep showing up in scenes, but Luke Wilson does get to keep mentoring them, so I guess he gets to feel fulfilled and stuff. And the Apache chief never shows up again in any capacity. So, what I'm saying is, when the pattern is laid out for you over and over and over again throughout all the storylines in the movie, it starts to feel a little repetitive, and therefore a little boring. All of the storylines essentially boil down to a good man knowing what it takes to make it in this country and helping women, girls, or Englishmen understand that, using bashful charity or tough love where appropriate. So we have a movie that aggressively models the kind of man Kevin Costner thinks he should be. Fine, but this movie is also trying to tell the story of the whole West. By being so myopic in its point of view, it ends up making the statement, inadvertently or not, that the West was and is male, and that women, while encouraged to participate because they're nice to have around, can only do so fully if they listen to the man they are most closely related, married, or attracted to, and then follow his advice. Like I said, the film's point of view is also aggressively white, which, again, isn't really that big a shock or inherently a bad thing, but again contributes to the movie being very repetitive while undercutting its purpose. The film has a parade of noble and villainous white people doing stuff, and a bunch of other people it gestures towards sometimes. The largest group of these is, of course, indigenous people who, to give credit, have actual characters and do stuff. In the beginning, the movie starts with a prolonged sequence of an Apache attack on a white settlement. It lasts like 15 minutes and is very thorough in its depiction of its terrors and atrocities. It's a well-done sequence, very tense and emotional, and it serves to set up various conflicts. Some settlers respond with racist violence, others with restraint and an eye to the bigger picture of avoiding an all-out war. Meanwhile, the Apaches discuss why some felt the attack was necessary due to resource depletion and not wanting broader conflict with other tribes in the area, and others express why they feel it will only make things worse in the long run. great. Then we don't have any more scenes with them except for women saying they'll follow their husbands until the end of the movie, when we get a sequence mirroring the first attack, when some racist settlers attack an Apache community and kill everyone for money. This sequence, however, only lasts a couple of minutes and significantly downplays the violence enacted on the Apaches. It's supposed to be one of those things of like, oh no, we did to them what they did to us, and that's bad.
What have we become?
We've given the word mob a bad name.
But the movie needed to hurry and get to its full trailer of the next episode instead, so the point doesn't really land. Whatever, they'll probably bring it up later. That's not even a joke. They probably will. This Uncle Kevin knows a lot more about stories than our other Uncle Kevin. Elsewhere, there is a token black family and some Chinese laborers whose involvement in the story is pretty trivial. Again, nothing really novel about this, but it adds to the movie's overall statement. The story of the West is the story of white people, and to a lesser extent the native people they fought with sometimes. It's 1955 again, kids, and it's time to tune into Lone Ranger. I don't bring this up to, nickel and dime the movie on the diversity of its casting. I bring it up because if your project in the year 2024 is to tell the whole story of the whole West, it might be a good idea to lend a spotlight to stories that have been overlooked over the years by the genre you're working in. This movie is at its best when something novel happens. The hardy pioneer woman and her pure-hearted daughter breathing through the barrels of a shotgun as they hide in their home's crawl space. It's interesting because I haven't seen it before and it feels real. I do not care one bit about whatever manual labor Kevin Costner has to do to support the whore and the baby. I am interested in the Chinese family in the tent next door, whose story could reflect the many thousands of Asian immigrants who came over to work and who have basically just shown up as faceless railroad and laundry workers in every Western ever made. We know so much more about this time period now than we did in the 50s, but having a movie like this that is so one-dimensional while taking on so broad a scope feels like a huge missed opportunity.
Use that much this year?
Haven't had much need of it yet.
So, why wasn't this just a show? Far be it from me to rain on another man's dream, but Kevin Costner's plan for this whole thing is nuts, right? Not one, not two, but 4 epic motion pictures telling a sprawling epic story of America? In a cinematic landscape where the last blockbuster proper Western was Dances with Wolves 30 years ago? And no, Django Unchained doesn't count. Calling it a Western is like calling Star Wars science fiction. Not to be a gatekeeper or anything. That isn't to say that there haven't been some great Westerns since then, but even the modestly budgeted ones don't tend to turn that much of a profit. And this one movie alone cost $100 million somehow. Times that by 4 movies, then times that by 3, and that's how much money these things need to make money. What universe does a series of Westerns, no matter how epic, earn $1 billion? Much less one that is so dull and unmovie-like and only appealing to your Fox News parents who won't think about it again after leaving the theater. Just make it a show. 4 3-hour movies is the same as a 12-episode show on HBO. Honestly, 10 episodes, there's stuff we can cut out, and that is super doable. You know why? Because Westworld exists, and they made a whole season of that show with better actors on a comparably epic scale, also shooting on location in Utah for as much as it took to make one of these movies. I mean, just make it on HBO. The movie isn't even panoramic. This story obviously lends itself to an episodic format rather than one weirdly paced, structureless blob of a movie. Just make it a show. Of course, if you were to make it a show, you'd probably have to abandon the project of reviving the Western of Bonanza and The Searchers and go for something a little more challenging and substantive. But heck, David Lynch tricked Showtime into letting him make 18 hours of bonkers TV that turned out to be his magnum opus. Why couldn't HBO do the same for Kevin Costner? Something to tap into that sweet, sweet Yellowstone audience. Then if it was challenging and substantive, the Yellowstone audience probably wouldn't be into it. I don't know. Maybe this is just the beautiful dream of a madman. That uniquely American miracle of getting a bunch of people to invest in your insane scheme and then shrugging and telling them, well, M's the breaks, when it turns out to be a colossal failure that absolutely no one wanted and absolutely everyone saw coming.
This pioneers from every
So do I recommend Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 1? Not really. It's got an amazing level of craftsmanship, and Costner knows how to make an exciting sequence. But the characters all suffer from archetype fatigue, and there's nothing really different or interesting in the larger narrative. That said, this is only the first chapter, and it's possible all these archetypes will be investigated and broken down in later episodes, and then interesting stuff might start to happen. Regardless, I do hope Kevin Costner gets to tell the story he set out to, but at this point I'm really not finding too much to invest in for myself.
Looks like we got ourselves a bad man right here.
Man, you would not believe the sweat that is happening on my head. I've been recording this for like half an hour. How do people wear these outside where it's hot and not air conditioned? Guess I'm just not a true man of the West.